Hi, everyone. Welcome to We Move Forward Together. And I'm so excited about today's episode. We're going to talk to Sister Barbara Schwarz. She has a unique gift to preach through art, and we're going to get into it really deeply. And I'm really fascinated by this aspect of art and creatives. Sister, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Steve.
So good to have you. It was so interesting when I first met you, and we're going to show some B-roll of all your artwork, and I was really taken back by the vast amount of artwork that you have. But tell me about the Dominican sisters are known to be preachers. Tell me about how that comes about through art.
Well, it comes about in the fact that art itself is part of our nature as human beings.
Right.
And initially, God created, but he didn't finish it. He left it to us. And it's part of our DNA to create. And for me, when I was a young person, I created with wood and with clay, and I made puppets, and I did different things. But it was only when I became part of the community, when I came to understand the charism and the fact that we praise, which means we see and we know God is in all things. We bless by who we are, in the diversity of who we are as people. And we preach. We preach through whatever means God gives us. Sometimes it's art, sometimes it's dance, sometimes it's words. But preaching in and of itself explains the presence of God we see in our lives.
You bring up a good point about creativity being in our DNA. I get that experience just through my work where I use my words a lot in sales and that, but I have that urge to work with my hands, to sing, to play music. When you don't use that, you feel lacking. So I find that so interesting. So tell me about when you joined the order, okay? How did your career take off, and how did you really settle into being such a great artist?
Well, when I entered the community, I entered with the sense of the community preached.
Okay.
And that sense of preaching for me was extremely important.
Okay.
But in the beginning, in the community, I was a teacher.
Okay.
I taught in the elementary, the high school level. I eventually taught adults through the Pastoral Formation Institute. Art has always been part of, but not all of what I do.
Okay. Wow. That's really interesting. Many people may not know, but the OP after your name is Office of Preachers, correct?
Order of Preachers.
Order of Preachers. Thank you for the correction. And, when I first hear the word preach, I'm thinking the priest at the altar. I'm thinking getting corrected by my parents sometimes, but it's in our actions. Was it St. Francis?
It's more than that. Preaching is what we do with our lives. Our lives show God's presence. How we live, how we act, what we put our energy into, all of that shows the presence of God, the God who is love and who wants us to live, to be most fully ourselves.
It's interesting that you say that in seeing the humanity of people, seeing Christ in people. I've been taken aback by a lot of different art, and we'll pop up your different art, your different mediums and stuff. But I was just thinking about the picture of Christ as a homeless person on a bench.
And I saw that when I was in Detroit, seeing the actual piece itself. And my experience of God in other people, the diversity of human beings. I didn't fully understand some of that until I worked in places where poverty was real, where one of the men who cleaned my office at the one point, he told me the story of how his family sent him from Salvador to Mexico to be away so that he would not be drafted by the army, which was persecuting people. And he told, to be away from your family for that long, from when he was 9 years old, that's tough. And he was sending home from the United States huge boxes of clothes and whatever to his family who needed it. I also, at one point in one parish, I was at one of our celebrations, and the woman and the man wanted me to meet their newborn child.
Okay.
So the sister in charge said, go to their house. So I did. And when I went to their house, the baby was in a dresser drawer on the floor. And they had music and a huge music setup, but it was explained to me that's the center of what Puerto Rico's about, is music. And they offered me something to eat, but when they opened the refrigerator, all I saw was the equivalent of a glass of juice, an egg, and maybe a piece of cheese.
Wow.
So I knew the needs are real, that when today we talk about the immigrants in the United States, it's not anything far-fetched. These people work. They work hard, but what they have is so little.
Yeah, it's true, and it's a shame, the politics of what's happening in our country, the dehumanizing of people, the scapegoating of people, that they're the reason why I don't have this or that, and that's not the case. Let me ask you this: how can art help show me the humanity of people?
Well, when I take a look at some of the situations, or I am asked to preach on some of the situations, I find that I sometimes need to get into it. Art can get us from the head into the heart.
Okay.
And so I've found that some of my art created things against violence, showed the need, or what I call the modern exodus of the people to leave the area. I found that my art told me something about the situation that I couldn't get just from reading and doing the research on a passage. Often the art would show me another aspect that I hadn't seen before. There was a piece I did where it was almost like the Scream. It was about Nicodemus.
All right.
And Nicodemus in the dark. And the whole painting was done in white on black. The whole thing was about God seeing and being spoken about in a way that I had never seen before.
Interesting.
And the same is true with some of the other art that I have done with young people and with others, showing them that inside themselves, that gift of God can come out. And they can come to see themselves in a different way. Once I taught the meaning behind the Old Testament to a group of adults by means of the arts. There were 3 or 4 sessions we had. And with the arts that we did in movement, in song, in using paint or clay, we found and discovered something inside themselves, who they were and what they were about, and what God was telling them inside, helped us to explain the Scripture and the ongoing love of God in all ways, in all things.
So interesting. When I've interviewed, there's a buzzword in social media now called creatives, people making content, making art. And when I speak to musicians, I always ask them, and I'm fascinated about their process to develop the muse. Do you have a specific process? Does it strike you? Do you sit down and say, hey, I'm going to do this today? You do a lot of research. I know that. So if you can give me a window into your process.
Well, often because I preach for the word.op.org.
Okay.
And I often do preaching in the Mother House for Vespers or for different events. When I take a look at the passage, if I'm doing a formal preaching, when I look at that, I sort of try and find what's inside of me.
Okay.
And sometimes inside of me it says, do it in clay, or do it in wood, or paint, or do a mandala. Whatever it is, it comes, and from that process, that creative process that I said in the beginning is part of our DNA, many of the different forms come from that. Also, like this Saturday, I did a video which will be shown Saturday morning for prayer.
Okay.
And the videos at times speak about a whole different way of looking at life, at art, at people, at things. I've done many videos. Some of them are simply meditations on some area of nature. Others, like the one for Saturday, integrate not only nature and the things on the grounds, but integrate that with what people do in the area. And I use some of the instances of our own events.
So what's interesting with the We Move Forward Together program is there are 4 energy centers that we focus on: ecology, what's around us, what God has given us in the earth, community, touched a little bit on social justice and spirituality. What I find fascinating is I consider myself a visual person. I can read text and grasp things, but if you show me, I seem to absorb it a little bit better, like a sponge. Having said that, you have a perspective on what you've created or what God has created through you, or pulling God out of you to create. And then there's a perspective of the viewer. Expand upon that for me a little bit.
Well, when I finish a work, any kind of work, whether it's a video, whether it's a piece of artwork, photography, whatever, it has a life of its own. It gets a life of its own after I finish it. And what it meant to me in the process is not necessarily what the people who see it do or feel. And I'll have to allow myself to be open to the fact that people have a different way of viewing my work. And sometimes that surprises me. And like there was some artwork that was chosen by a doctor friend of mine who's part of the Dominican Institute for the Arts. She was doing a presentation on healing, and she chose a number of my abstract pieces to be part of her presentation. She didn't explain them. She used them as illustrative of what she was saying. And it was different from what I had thought of when I did the abstract piece.
Interesting.
So the different ways of looking at things. Jesus and the Bent Over Woman is now on every continent except Antarctica, unless it's in somebody's pocket there. It is in hundreds of places. And people have told me that for them, like the last one asked me to send her a big picture of it so that she could have her sister who was in hospice meditate on it. Because Jesus looks the woman in the eyes. He doesn't look over her. He doesn't go behind her. He looks the bent over woman in the eyes and heals her.
Wow. So
people see different things, even in painting or in photography. They see a different meaning.
Right. Yeah, it's funny because even when I talk to people about music, I generally don't ask them, what does this mean? What's the story behind it? I always love to leave it to the audience to make it a part or a thread their life and moving forward. Hey, I want to ask you about icons. I remember speaking to somebody and they said, They didn't say they didn't draw icons or paint icons.
They write them.
They write the icon.
Well, I don't do icons. But people who do, they write them. There's a process they go through. It's a very technical and special process.
Do you have a favorite medium that you go to? Like, what's your go-to? You get hit with inspiration. Is there one thing or favorite or an easy?
It all depends on what the topic is. Photography is easy for me.
Right.
Putting it together into a video can be very, very challenging, especially the one, say, for Saturday, because it was single lines. It wasn't a song that I was using. It was some single lines and sort of a poetry kind of piece that they gave me. But it tells me, in some ways, I have to really think and see how is that expressed in a piece of art.
Interesting.
And sometimes it's painting, and sometimes it's a piece of clay, or it's been wood carving.
In looking at your background, I don't know if you mentioned this, but art has soul. Can you dive into that for me?
You quoted that from someone saying about soul. I don't know that it has soul.
Okay.
I know that it has a life of its own. When I finish a piece, it has a life of its own. It can be interpreted in many ways, depending on the life presence of a person. When I do mandalas with the young people or with older adults, what happens is they express their life and what's going on in their lives. But when you look at it, it may have a totally different meaning. And that totally different meaning is what you call soul. What I just call is an interpretation of the life of the art.
Let me ask you this. Compared to the spoken word preaching and art, how can it express what's happening as far as our social ills today?
Well, I think it can show that in many different ways. There are times when those social ills, especially violence, I've done some pieces on violence and in painting and hands that are hurting. And in the video I just did, there was a picture of hands against a barbed wire fence. The ways in which the arts can preach to social ills basically come out of our experience of those ills. I didn't fully understand some of that until I got to know people who experienced it. Like when I got to know the guy who cleaned my office, when I got to be in the house of those people, when I got to see and hear people who didn't have money to pay their rent or buy food. When you see and hear those things, all of a sudden something comes forth. Even when it was the Women's March, posters and things in that. It all depends on what it is that you need to see in the social ills. And I think it's a case of how do we respond? It challenges us. Those pieces of art, they challenged me to look at life in a different way or to take care of needs in a different way. And they do that for other people as well.
Yeah, when you were telling me about this, I was just thinking in my mind when I've driven through or walked through the inner city, and boom, there's a mural. A lot of it is tragedy that happened in the neighborhood. Somebody shot down George Floyd, or what's a fantastic reminder of what's happening at ground level, so to speak. What's happening in the trenches, and I think
I saw that in Chicago.
Oh, did you? Yeah.
In Chicago, there were a lot of murals done in a poor area that really showed the violence, the hunger, the needs. And it really challenged us as we walked to remember that.
another thing's popping into my mind is how art can help us transcend our current situation. I'll give you an example. My daughter went to Guatemala. She had an impression of, hey, when I go there, I'm going to see people who are so downtrodden and unhappy. And when she got there, I said, what was one of the impactful things? And she's an artist as well. And she said, the colors. She goes, I expected to see people downtrodden. And I've met some of the most joyous people of my life. And the colors were just blew her away. It was just amazing.
Well, that's true too. Here, when people used to go to certain of the parish outreaches,
right.
They would get a box of food and they'd go, you see that over there? My neighbor really likes that. Put that in my box. No, they didn't get more.
Right.
But they filled their boxes with things that the people around them needed. They responded to those needs. And it's in experiencing those people. It's in opening ourselves up to those people, places, and things that are different that give us something to not only speak and write about, but also to celebrate. I found that the poor, the very poor, are often the happiest.
Yes, it's amazing.
They are happy. They do what they can to help others. The ones who are downtrodden are we. Those of us who think about what they should be like.
Mm. Yeah.
And that's different. The artist sees and hears and is open to a wider view. And it makes you think and realize new things and open yourself to. And that's important.
Yeah, you know what's interesting? As I'm getting older, and my daughter's a great person to point these things out to me, is really counting our blessings. And I'm just kind of slowing things down where you can be in survival mode throughout your life. And I want to talk about God's creation and ecology and where do you find inspiration in nature?
Well, from being young, when I was young, in my neighborhood in Seaford, there at one point where the high school is now was a dairy farm.
Okay.
And I used to love it if my father accidentally on the way back from the train station took that road and the cows were crossing over the road from the place where they had been all day. And when I was very young, supposedly the farmer would only allow me, of all the kids, in to when the cows were milking.
Wow.
And because of how I responded to them. But I used to catch frogs, do all those kind of things that you do outside. I did my chores were outside chores. But later, as time went on, I would go to the local parks. I'd go to the parks around here that are sometimes very, very beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely.
And have all sorts of animals. I've taken pictures. I have a beautiful picture downstairs of a hawk in flight and a number of ones and hawks here on the grounds. I had ones of foxes and other animals. They inspire me by how they live, by how they move, by the beauty they have, by their care for each other. And so I've done things like when Thomas Berry was first out, I wrote reflection booklets on Thomas Berry's work.
Okay.
When it was other times, I've done, as I said, videos on nature that show that movement of God's creation being so beautiful and so endangered.
Right.
Both ends. And so I've had a history of that from when I was very young.
So that was that imprint as a child that built the foundation for your exploration into art, I would assume.
Well, somewhat.
Somewhat, yeah. Before I forget, we're going to have links in the descriptions to all of Sister's art and her cards. We're really interested in your comments and your suggestions. And please subscribe to the We Move Forward channel here. I was just thinking about this walk I had taken on the North Fork. I spied a Suffolk County park, and I took a walk, and there were wild turkeys all about. And I'm watching, there were people in the distance, and they're putting their hands out, and these little birds are landing on their hands. It was like a dream, but it was just such a great experience to stop and take in what what God has done for us, and what He's
Right.
given to us.
And when I was on my 30-day retreat,
Mhm.
there was a whole flock of turkeys that would be outside my door, and I'd see them fly up into the trees. I didn't realize they flew,
Right. Short distances. Yeah.
but not so short.
Oh, really?
And to see the animals that came out at night was different.
Yeah, like I live on the Great South Bay, and fortunate enough to go out on a boat on occasion. And we talked about perspective in art and seeing nature from the water and the perspective. And let me tell you, after COVID, it seems like nature has come back. We have eagles in Babylon in the area, and whales servicing off, a couple hundred yards off the shore. And it's just, when you're there and you experience that, it's just so
And it's
lifts
that
your heart.
experience that comes inside of you that often needs to be expressed in some way.
Got you. Hey, I want to talk about some of the organizations that you've been involved with. You were the DIA president. So tell me about that group.
The Dominican Institute for the Arts is an international organization.
Hmm.
We have members from Europe. We have members from all over the United States, from Australia. We have we gather usually 1 week in the summer
Mhm.
or for a few days in the summer, and we share our artwork. We talk about how we go about it. Each person has their unique way of expression. I was president at one point in time, and at that time I really worked on our communication network of emails and later on the web. I became the webmaster. But, we learn from each other. It's the diversity. We have laity, we have friars, we have sisters, we have associates,
Mhm.
we have all sorts of members. And that diversity brings a whole different way of looking at things and helps us to really grow in our art. Follow what you hear. Express what you've heard in yourself. Do it. You're not going to be able to, in the present situation, probably preach from the altar.
Mhm.
But you will be able, the arts are a way that people learn from and can preach. And do. It's the arts themselves. Just think about the clothes you wear, the colors that you wear. I bet, the mood of the person coming downstairs for breakfast by what they're wearing.
Right.
You know when you've outgrown certain ideas
Mhm.
or when you need certain ideas. So all of that is a way of the arts. In fact, everyone has a bit of artist in them.
Yeah, I agree. I love the idea of listening to that inner voice and do it. Sister Barbara Schwarz, thanks so much for joining us on We Move Forward Together. I really want to explore this another time. Would love to have you back. And we're going to post some B-roll of your art so people can get exposed to it. And we'll have links in the description. So please follow Sister's work. You're really going to appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Steve.
Thanks for being here. Take care, everyone. Be well.